The last pick in the NFL draft gets the year-long nickname Mr. Irrelevant. Immediately after the draft, Mr. Irrelevant is flown out to California to accept the Lozman Trophy and attend a parade in his honor. It's a tradition a former player started in 1976. The idea is to celebrate that draft selection rather than just sticking them with that label, the last guy picked in the draft. Of the 49 people ever to be celebrated as Mr. Irrelevant, kicker Ryan Suckup had earned the largest contract up until this year. That was when Brock Purdy signed a contract 13 times larger, $265 million, 182 of it guaranteed, to play quarterback for 5 years for the San Francisco 49ers. NFL teams spend the equivalent of a small country's GDP to gather all the resources they can about the quarterback position. Brock still slipped through the cracks and ended up with a top 5 contract in the NFL. How? GPU clusters analyzed 2 decades of recruiting data that go back to when the players were 14 years old. People still missed on Brock, and then he wound up being a franchise quarterback. How? Hand size, GPS on the field, and every biometric test on the planet can be given to a potential NFL draft pick. Brock still didn't pop on anyone's radar and ended up a centimillionaire. How? Respectfully, how the did Brock Purdy happen? As inspiring as Brock's story is, that question drove me to make this video. I wanted to know the answer so we can find the next Brock Purdy, the next elite quarterback that our traditional evaluation systems fail to identify. Because make no mistake, for broadcasters like me, for coaches, administrators, fans, there's a lot of opportunity in identifying the next Brock Purdy. If you're already jumping ahead and saying, Max, it's not that complicated, it's just Kyle Shanahan's system, I don't think the 49ers make a $50 million a year bet on this guy if that's the case. If it was just Matt Campbell's influence on his mindset, we'd see more Cyclone quarterbacks in the NFL. And if there was something in the water in Arizona when he was growing up, Spencer Rattler would also have a $250 million deal. It couldn't be as simple as any of that. So I dedicated myself to finding a real answer. And after weeks of studying and reading articles and watching film, I had nothing. Until, with no help from anyone else, my own undeniable singular genius eventually showed through like I knew it would. I found it. A mathematical equation that'll help us identify a Brock Purdy. Now, I know taking this in's a lot, so let me explain each variable. Let's start with the most important one, sitting under the entire equation: rarity. How rare is Brock Purdy? How often does a guy like this come around? With his new deal, Brock just cracked the top 5 in quarterback contracts in the NFL. I looked at all the NFL quarterback contracts going back to 2011, and over that time, 26 other quarterbacks earned a top 5 deal. Of those 26, only 11 were taken outside of the first round like Brock. Of those 11, 8 saw their draft stock significantly hurt by at least one measurable in the pre-draft process, in a way similar to Brock. Side note, Brock was dinged for a lot of his measurables, but I thought it was worth mentioning that of the entire group of 27, he's the only dude with arms shorter than 30 inches. That sounds like a weird thing to care about, but it all matters. Arm strength is way more about hip explosion, core strength, mobility than it is arm length, but the reality is, it still is the key throwing lever. Back to that group of 8, only 4 started 45 or more games in college like Brock did. And 2 of those 4 were, like Brock, under 6 feet 1 inches tall. The 2 we have left are Russell Wilson and Drew Brees. Russ rushed for more than twice as many yards as Drew and Brock in their first 16 games. So, there really has only been one other Brock Purdy since 2011. A productive 4-year starter in college, dinged for his measurables, under 6'1", and taken outside of the first round, who ended up with a top 5 quarterback contract. His name was Drew Brees, meaning we get one Brock Purdy every 2 decades. That's our rarity variable, but we have another variable that stands alone. Let's go back to that group of 8 quarterbacks taken outside of the first round with at least one bad combine number that ended up with a top 5 NFL contract. Check the names. What stands out? Beyond a nightmare blunt rotation or an incredible a cappella group, what stands out to you? There is something that all these guys have in common. I would not have guessed this, and I double-checked and triple-checked. The best measurable for every single one of them was a short burst drill. Don't believe me? Brock Purdy, 90th percentile in the 10-yard split. Tony Romo, 76th percentile in the 20-yard shuttle. Kirk Cousins, 65th percentile in the 3-cone drill. Drew Brees, 76th percentile in the 20-yard shuttle. shuttle. Russell Wilson, 94th percentile in the 20-yard shuttle. Jimmy G, 69th percentile in the 20-yard shuttle. Andy Dalton, 65th percentile in the 20-yard shuttle. Even Tom Brady, the most infamous combine of all time. The only drills where he performed outside of the 5th percentile were the 20-yard shuttle and the 3-cone drill. That's why burst sits alone here, outside of the parentheses in the equation for what makes up a Brock Purdy. But let's get to the only variable that's squared in this equation. It's twice as important as the others. You know it matters because all the debate shows, coach speak, and guys like me with a logo on their microphone say so. Competitiveness. I am here to say, and not just to protect my status as an industry plant, that this is real. Competitiveness is a skill. It's that chip on that shoulder, that internal drive. It's hard to coach. It's easy to say you want to win. It's a lot harder to prove you want to win more than any other guy when it matters. And Brock has done that. 7 game-winning drives at Iowa State. That means the dude led a game-winning drive in 15.2% of his starts. To put that in context, you remember the guy running in his white boxer briefs from before? The GOAT, Tom Brady, set the NFL record with 58 game-winning drives over the course of his career. That comes out to a game-winning drive on 17.4% of his starts. You can't quantify wanting it more, and that's what's so frustrating about competitiveness, but come on, that's a decent objective to measure. Less numerical, but better measure? Tape from an Iowa State practice David Lombardi found from back when Brock was a third-string true freshman leading the third-team offense against the first-team defense. At USC, I was in Brock Purdy's shoes here, and it's intimidating. It's not easy to be the true freshman quarterback leading the scout team against the starting defense. People think the competition doesn't start until Saturday. No, it starts on the practice field, and you gotta lead a squad of walk-ons to do something against the starting defense and show that you're worthy of earning a spot. It's cutthroat. You're taking food off another man's table, and the guys that thrive in this scenario are the competitors. So Brock's running an option play here called Bangle. His read is the strong side defensive end. If that dude gets upfield, he'll pitch it quickly inside. If that end sinks down and closes that gap and no one sets that edge, well then Brock will keep running and try to get in the end zone. His read here is all Big 12 defensive end Jaquan Bailey. On this play though, those rules I just gave you are great. Bailey's not really upfield, but he's not cinching down and he's kind of coming right at Brock. Brock just reacts, gives him a little shimmy, maybe fakes the pitch inside, ultimately gets the edge, uses his athleticism and dives in the end zone for a touchdown. Matt Campbell still remembers this exact play, saying, quote, "You could almost feel the entire place erupt on that play." Again, I cannot quantify it, I cannot bottle it, but I can tell you that competitiveness matters. So much so that when we're talking about what makes Brock Purdy a Brock Purdy, you gotta square that variable. Let's address the elephant in the room though. See, I don't expect you to just trust my word in a one-sentence argument that this whole thing is not just Kyle Shanahan's system. So let's dive into the film more. And the film shows us that Brock Purdy is efficient. Max, what does efficient mean? Well, it can be embodied by 2 classic football cliches. He keeps the offense on schedule and he takes what the defense gives him. Those are cliches, but there's a reason because it's true. But most importantly, efficiency is a skill. Keeping the offense on track means you're not putting the offense in negative plays. You're getting the ball out of your hands. You're not taking sacks. Your temperament, leadership, and pace aren't allowing guys to make penalties. When you call a play and something goes crazy, you don't make it worse. Oh, and you also don't turn the ball over. But you also don't miss opportunities. That can come big plays down the field when it's a big shot call, or it can be a little check down that's not really sexy. Maybe your 3rd or 4th option, but you check the ball down, you get 7 yards, and then that sets up the next shot play. Efficiency also requires humility. See, nowadays, so much of the quarterback position is about how can this system evolve to the quarterback. It takes a special quarterback to check his ego at the door and say, no, I'll evolve to the system. It also takes humility because you're going to get criticized that your stats aren't crazy. You're going to get criticized that it's the system and not your talent. How do you manage that? A lot of quarterbacks would get their feelings hurt with all the criticism that Brock has received from yours truly at times about how, hey, it's the system, it's not the quarterback. Well, Brock's probably like, Max, get out of here. It's me, not the system. Checking your ego at the door. It also comes through when you have a big time play. You've been practicing all week for a big time post shot down the field. Well, what happens when it's not covered? Can you check your ego? Are you going to force it, or are you going to check the ball down below? The Kyle use check, allow him to get 5 or 6 yards, and I'll see you on the next big play call. Because Kyle Shanahan's system does not work if the quarterback's forcing the ball, if the quarterback's always trying to make the big play. Brock Purdy even said it himself. He said the keys weren't given to me. It had to be earned. Since day one, came in to learn Kyle's system, his playbook, and earn the respect of my teammates. Brian Greasy, the 49ers quarterback coach, said, I knew that we valued the fact that Brock was selfless. You can tell pretty quickly if a quarterback is about lifting other people up around him or if it's about him. If you only look for quarterbacks who thrive out of structure, you only looking for Caleb Williams or Lamar Jackson, you're gonna miss finding Brock Purdy. If someone someone says, he's just a system quarterback or he's a game manager, your ears should perk up. I know I said the most important variable in our equation was rarity, but it's actually this. It's luck. Brock got mono and then, and I'm not making this up, it's the most Arizona story that I've ever heard, got a hand injury from a cactus. Both impacted his recruitment. Iowa State started recruiting quarterbacks late in the game because they weren't sure if their starting quarterback, Kyle Kemp, would be granted eligibility for a 6th season. If Kemp's ruling came sooner or the dang cactus wasn't in play, Brock might have ended up at a school where his competitiveness wasn't cultivated the way it was in Ames. That's luck. Brock shouldn't have got a chance to start in the NFL as a rookie. The quarterback the 49ers took 3rd overall in Brock's draft, the guy who was supposed to be the face of the franchise, Trey Lance, broke his ankle. The guy they paid over $100 million over the past 5 years, Jimmy Garoppolo, broke his ankle. On average, only 20% of third-string quarterbacks ever even get in during an NFL season. Brock Purdy just entering a game was defying the odds, let alone the odds of him becoming the first ever third-string rookie quarterback to rattle off 8 straight wins. Just the shot at it was luck. That's all to say, no matter how dialed every other aspect of the equation is, we have to account for luck. Some shit's just gotta bounce your way. Let's bring it all home. So Brock Purdy broke the modern quarterback evaluation tools by being a Mr. Irrelevant with a $250 million contract. That also kind of continues to break my brain the more I think about it. So I had to create this equation. I hate to break it to you though, it doesn't perfectly encapsulate Brock Purdy. If you've watched the video this far, you know there's more to this guy than just 5 variables. But as much as I've joked around and how abundantly clear it is I shouldn't go into applied mathematics, I think the equation really does help with our ultimate goal. We want to identify the next Brock Purdy. To do that, we have to keep in mind rarity, burst, competitiveness, system efficiency, and luck. Shoot, maybe we can just look for a kid with a cactus quill stuck in his hand.